and welcome to the fifth program of the TOOS Foundation.
خانم ها، آقایان، به پنجمین برنامه بنیاد توس خوش آمدید. ما امشب شما را به مسیر پیدایش موسیقی کلاسیک در ایران و تأثیرپذیری موسیقیدانان ایرانی از موسیقی غرب و آغاز اپرا و باله در شب تجلیل از حسین دهلوی و اولین باغچبان میبریم.
Based on evidence found in paintings of the Safavi Empire, it appears that Western music has had a presence in Iran for several hundred years. But a real interest in classical music wasn't developed until the beginning of the Qajar dynasty. Napoleon III presented a piano as a present to Fath Ali Shah. Travelers and tourists to the Western world brought back with them light instruments such as the violin and flute. In order to arrange military music for the Qajar court, Western musicians were invited to Iran all the way through the 19th century. Now, the first military musicians in Iran were Italian, Austrian, and French by the names of Marco, Ryan, and Bousquet. But they all had a short stay in Iran and later were replaced by a Frenchman from Artois named Alfred Jean-Baptiste Lemaire. And so, military music was the first step in familiarizing Iranians with the vast culture of classical Western music. The format of military music had a great influence on the modern era of classical music in Iran, and this was evident all the way up to 1960. Lemaire wrote the first national anthem for Iran, which was performed by the Royal Military School Orchestra and conducted by him in 1905. This was recorded on vinyl for the gramophone. Lemaire's students, who worked diligently in the Dor al-Fornoon School of Music, included Soleiman Khan and Gholam Reza Amir Panje Musikan Shibashi, who was famous as Salah Mu'azzez, and was the first in a generation of musicians by the name of Minbashian, who held high-ranking positions in the arts and in military office until 1979. The second great artist and musician from the Minbashian family was Nasrullah Khan Minbashian, alias Nasro Sultan, the eldest son of Salah Mu'azzez, born in Tehran in 1881. Now, the first son of Nasro Sultan Minbashian was Mehrdad Palbod, who married the youngest daughter of Reza Shah Pahlavi, Her Royal Highness Shams. He worked as the Minister of Art and Culture for 30 years, giving outstanding service to many aspects of Iranian art. His second son was Gholam Hossein Minbashian, the first Iranian to graduate from the Gustav Hollander International Conservatory of Music in Germany with a diploma in the violin. Gholam Hossein Minbashian extended the School of Music for Higher Education and employed 12 distinguished professors from Czechoslovakia to stay in Tehran and teach music at the school. Many of the great musicians of the Pahlavi era, such as Morteza Hanoneh, Feridun Naseri, Samin Bakhsheban, and Hussein Nosehi, were graduates of this school and were trained themselves by the Czechoslovakian professors. Mu'azzez family made great efforts to establish international music in Iran, alongside others of their contemporaries, including musicians from the army. The most outstanding of these was Ali Nahi Vaziri, who returned to Iran in 1924 after studying in Germany and France. He opened the first school of music for the support and preservation of Iranian national music. Vaziri intended to incorporate and fuse some of the techniques, forms, and instrumentations of Western classical music with Iranian national music that hitherto had only been played within the framework of radifs. Vaziri wrote for both tar and orchestra. He performed his own compositions until 1938, whereafter his loyal students Ruhollah Khalegi and later Hussein Dehlavi continued to arrange and perform his work. In 1941, Iran had several orchestras. The Symphony Orchestra, which now included some Czechoslovakian musicians, conducted by Minbashian, the Chamber Orchestra, and the Orchestra of Wind and Brass Instruments, conducted by Hassan Khodmard and Ali Mohammad Khadem Misor. Rudolf Urbantes was the next conductor of the Symphony Orchestra, and later it was taken over by Parviz Mahmoud. It was he who changed the name of the orchestra to the Orchestra of the Higher Education Music School, and it performed works by Iranian composers. After Parviz Mahmoud emigrated to America, Rubik Gregorian, a violin teacher in the School of Music, became conductor of the Tehran Symphony Orchestra, and later he also emigrated to America. Now in 1955, the great violinist Heshmat Sanjari became conductor of the Tehran Symphony Orchestra. At this point, we should say a few words about Monouche Sakhbokhri. After graduating from the Tehran School of Music for Higher Education, this great conductor and virtuoso player went to Europe for further education, as well as to study composition. Boi's contribution to Iranian music was his remarkable achievement in gathering together the works of Iranian composers scattered all over the world since 1979. Tonight, Laura Dorje will perform for us the dance of Dayere, composed by Heshmat Sanjari and conducted by Farnoush Behzod. During these years, the offices for the arts were very active. They worked under the supervision of two important establishments supported by the government, which supported artists both artistically and financially. The first of these was the Ministry of Art and Culture. The second establishment was Iranian National Television, which started in 1958. During the latter part of the 1960s, Iranian music was at its most flourishing since the constitutionalists' era. Iran's economy and political standing at this time was flourishing. Many famous artists from all over the world came to perform in Iran, and Rudaki Hall was built with all the very latest available facilities, revolving stages, up-to-the-minute lighting and sound technology, lush interior decoration, and hospitality spaces, not to mention a fine collection of artworks inspired by Iranian paintings. Among the professors of the Music School of Higher Education, there were a few who always made a special effort to promote Iranian composers. The most important of these were Hushang Ostorvar, Feredun Farzaneh, and Samin Bakhshiban. With his nationalistic feelings and love for nature, he wrote music that is remarkable for its variation of melody, its use of lyrics, and its dynamism. Bakhshiban died this year on the morning of Nowruz 2009 in Istanbul, and we remember him for his great heart and his love for music. Samin Bakhshiban's wife, Evlin, studied in Turkey and was one of the finest opera singers in Tehran. She was a virtuoso artist and a great teacher, and she also performed internationally. She was educated in the famous music conservatory Sanon Mehmor, and in 1985 went back to Turkey with her husband. There she became a professor at the Ankara Music Conservatory. Pari Zangone began her study of music at a very early age, and her talents were discovered by Mrs. Evelyn Bakhsheban in 1971. As a result of a car accident, she lost her eyesight. Sama is a mezzo-soprano. She began her musical career playing the violin, and her first singing teacher was Mrs. Evelyn Bakhsheban. She was a first from the School of Higher Education in Music in Tehran, and then went to Austria for a postgraduate degree, completing the 7-year master's course of the Vienna Singing Academy in 5 years, and graduating with a first. Also at this time, some of the best-known female singers in Iran began to study the operatic form. Fakhera Sabah, Monir Vakili, wife of Senator Enoyatola Majidi, Farah Pahoni, Afiatpur, who in 1950 sang in West Germany in some of the great opera houses, and also she played in the movies. Sudabe Tajbakhsh, another great singer, currently singing at the Munich Opera. And Evelyn Bakhsheban. Rohangiz Yashmi, another great singer of international standing, who was also outstanding for her charity. The male artists, Enoyatola Rezai, Hussein Sarshor. Ladies and gentlemen, Mario Tagadusi was born in Iran and began his musical career very early, singing and playing the violin. His remarkable talent won him a scholarship for further education in America. After graduating as a singer in Los Angeles, he then studied at the world-famous Juilliard School and was taught by maestros such as Shirley Miles, Renat Taboldi, and Luciano Pavarotti. Lazarion, the Armenian artist, was the only teacher in this field who was teaching various classical dances in her private classes. Her private dance school was active until 1977-78, and Nejad Ahmadzodeh, with the help of his wife Hayedeh, helped to expand this establishment in 1960, and with the help of foreign tutors, they trained many students. And not to be forgotten are such famous Iranian dancers and teachers as Professor Abdullah Nazemi, founder of the Pars Ballet Group, Hayedeh Ahmadzodeh, Hayedeh Shangiziab, Jamele Kharazi, Merzedeh Tahvildari, and Jamshid Sagabashi, and that hard-working artist Farzaneh Kabuli. Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, the great Russian composer, composed many wonderful ballets such as Cinderella, The Sleeping Beauty, and The Nutcracker Suite, Also, the Ballet of Swans, which he wrote to entertain his sister and her young children. But tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we shall watch a different ballet, The Dying Swan, which was first performed in St. Petersburg by Anna Pavlova, and the piece was composed by Charles-Camille Sanson. This ballet has influenced interpretations of Odette in Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake many, many times. This ballet is not about a ballerina being able to transform herself into a swan, but it's about death. The swan, a powerful metaphor. Between 1966 and 1978, Robert de Warren, an American researcher, designer, and choreographer, became interested in the wealth of Iranian folk dances. And with the support of the Ministry of Arts and Culture at that time, he traveled to many parts of Iran, making films of these dances and preserving them for posterity.
نیکولای ریمسکی-کورساکوف در سال 1888 سمفونی شهرزاد را نوشت. این سمفونی بر اساس کتاب شب‌های سرزمین‌های عربی نوشته شده است، ولی بعدها او تصمیم گرفت که این قطعه را برای ارکستر کاملاً جدا از موسیقی شب‌های سرزمین‌های عربی بیافریند و بالاخره به نحوی نوشته شد که با الهام از آن سرزمین فانتزی شرق در آن کاملا نشان داده می شود.
To the great composers who wrote for opera in Iran: Ahman Pejman, Loris Cheknavorian, Emmanuel Malak Aslanian, and Hossein Dehlavi, the famous and remarkable composer and director of the National Music School, who has written many pieces both for the concert platform and for vocalists.
دوستان عزیز، بسیار متاسفم که نمیتوانم در چنین شبی که خاطرات دور ما دوباره زنده شد در کنارتان باشم. از بنیاد توس و سازمان‌های دیگری با همین اهداف باید بسیار تشکر کرد.
هنر و هنرمند مثل عشق عرفانی میان دو نیازمند چون دو ساحل رودخانه باید تا به نهایت کشیده شوند و هرگز به هم نرسند. هنرمندی که هنرش را در کمال بداند و تمام کند مرده است. او تا آخرین لحظات حیات باید بیافریند و باید این دو خط موازی مثل دو راه در مقابل آینه تا به بی نهایت منعکس کننده هم شوند. هنرمند با نوایش، سازش، رنگش گریستنش چونان گلگشتی در باغ روشنی که دیوارهایش از آب شفاف ساخته شده روحش را صفا می دهد و اثرش را خلق می کند.
that most honorable artist, our star tonight, Evelyn Bakhshevan. Please. Mrs. Parisama.
خسته نباشین و از زحماتی که برای ایران و ایرانی و فرهنگ ایرانی میکشین واقعا ازتون ممنونیم.
متشکرم، مرسی که این شانس رو به من دادید، خیلی متشکرم. اگر پشتیبانی شما و مردم دیگر نازنینی مثل شما نبود، ما هیچ وقت نمیتونستیم صدای خودمون رو با نام ایران به گوش غیر ایرانی ها به خصوص برسونیم. خیلی متشکرم.